What is up, everybody? I'm Johnny Blacklight Bro. Let's get into some videos.
This story was sent to me by a locksmith, and he said that there's one house that he'll never forget. And at first, I thought maybe he was exaggerating until I read what happened and until I saw the pictures. Now, of course, there's no way for me to verify that any of this is true, so take it as entertainment. The viewer had asked me to keep his identity private, so I'm going to call him Frank. He told me that he'd been a locksmith in the rural parts of Georgia for about 30 years, and most of his jobs were very simple: people locking themselves out of their cars, replacing deadbolts after break-ins, or helping banks get into abandoned homes. And he'd seen just about everything. He even worked with the sheriff's department, who he had a contract with. But one call that happened about 5 years ago still bothers him. He said the sheriff's office contacted him after neighbors reported hearing a smoke detector constantly chirping for days inside of an old farmhouse. Nobody had seen the owner, which is a elderly man who lived alone. For nearly 3 weeks, this was going on. His truck was still parked outside, the mail was piled up by the front door, and no one could reach him at all. The deputies wanted a locksmith instead of kicking in the front door and causing the guy more trouble than what was necessary. So Frank arrived expecting possibly one of the worst welfare checks ever. And he unlocked the front door, and the deputies went inside first, and what shocked him wasn't what they found, it was actually the lack thereof. It was what they didn't find. The house looked lived in, but almost unnaturally clean, right? The dishes had been washed and put away. A cup of coffee sat on the counter with mold floating at the top of it. As if someone just simply got up one morning and walked away. The television remote was neatly placed on the arm of the couch, and the bed had been perfectly made. There was not a single sign of struggle or that anyone was there anytime recently. There was no red stuff, there was no overturned furniture, no broken windows, there was nothing. And the deputies searched every room while Frank waited in the hallway. And that's when one of them noticed something a little strange. At the very end of the hall was a very heavy wooden door with an old deadbolt that was installed on the outside of it. And the deputy assumed it was maybe a storage room, and he had asked Frank if he could possibly open it. And as Frank walked closer, he immediately noticed something that made the hair on his arm stand up when you get that little spidey sense feeling. The paint around the bottom half of the door was covered in long, deep scratches, not on the hallway side, but on the inside of it. And he said you could tell because the little curls of white paint had been pushed outward through the gaps around the frame of it. And something or someone had been clawing from the inside trying to get its way out. So one deputy joked that maybe a dog had gotten trapped in there, and nobody laughed. Nobody really wanted to find that. But Frank went through and he ended up unlocking the deadbolt, and the second that the latch clicked, the smoke detector that had been chirping all week suddenly stopped in that exact moment. Not because the battery died, it just stopped. The room beyond was empty, completely empty. There was no furniture, there was no windows, bare wood floors, but in the center of the room sat a single old wooden dining chair that was facing the wall. And on the wall above it were hundreds of tally marks carved into the wood, like some stuff that we would see in a horror movie. Some were very neat, others looked rushed, as if whoever made them had started losing control, maybe even losing their mind. The deputies searched every inch of that room, and there was nothing. There was no attic, no crawl space, no hidden door, no hidden compartment in the floor. I mean, it was just this chair in this room. And then Frank noticed something else. The scratches on the inside of the door didn't stop near the handle. They actually continued all the way up the ceiling. Some were over 7 feet high. As everyone stood there trying to make sense of what they were looking at, one deputy quietly had asked the others, if nobody's been here for 3 weeks, who turned the smoke detector off? Which is something that they were all thinking. Now, the homeowner was never found, and there was no evidence that he'd packed his belongings or planned to leave. And according to Frank, the sheriffs, they eventually ruled it a missing persons case, and they locked the house back up and they moved on. But before Frank left, he had asked one of the neighbors if the old man had any family or next of kin or anybody. And the neighbor looked confused, and he's like, family? He's like, he lived there alone, but we've never seen anybody visit him. But every now and then, usually after midnight, we'd hear him talking to somebody in that back room. And the neighbors always just assumed that maybe it was the company. Now, Frank ended his email stating that he's unlocked thousands of doors, but that's the only one that he still wished that stayed closed in the end. Now, I provided pictures. These were taken by Frank. They had to be documented by his locksmithing company. So he kindly provided them for me, and I'm going to share them with you. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
That's so wild, man. Definitely sounds like some very nefarious things were going on in this house. Who knows what? I don't even know if I want to know what, but man, that's just bone-chillingly creepy. It's hard to even imagine what the scenario was. I couldn't imagine finding something like that, man. Let me know what you think in the comments below is going on with that.
If I'm going to be scared, you are going to be scared with me. It is time for another spooky story. I am Autumn in Appalachia. Send me your spooky stories, add me on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. Same handle, without further ado. You guys are getting a 2-for-1 special tonight because both of these stories are shorter, but man, are they creepy. So I just decided to combine them. I'm tagging both of these followers on TikTok. I didn't catch the first follower's name, so let's just call her Catherine for the video. Catherine said she is 47 years old now, that this happened when she was 5. She knows for a fact it was real, and it is something that still haunts her when she thinks about it. So she said that she lived in this lonely Texas farmhouse, and one night she's laying in bed by herself in her room. Her bedroom door is open, and she is having a particularly hard time going to sleep this night because the next day was like the first day of school, and she was really nervous about it. As she's laying there in the darkness, she sees a hand appear at the bedroom door. Something was standing outside of the bedroom door, shrouded in darkness, and all she can see is this hand. She said it is an abnormally long hand with like very sharp, long fingernails. It looked inhuman, and as it reaches around the door frame, its fingers kind of curl around the door, and then the hand begins like beckoning to her, like motioning her and waving her to come over. She said that she laid there watching it for like 5 minutes straight. She knows she was not seeing things. She knows she was not asleep, and she had never been told at this age about anything like a demonic entity or like paranormal things, and so she didn't really know any better. After watching it for a few minutes, she decides to get out of bed and walk to the door in the darkness to follow this hand that's beckoning to her. When she gets to that door, it's gone. She looks out and nothing is there. This, at this point, terrified her. She runs, gets back in the bed, covers herself up with a blanket, and just tried to wait for daylight. She said she never saw it again after that. The second story submission is from Eliza. She said that her granddad grew up in the Scottish Highlands, and around 9 or 10 years old, she had an experience in his house she'll never forget. Now, she was told by her granddad growing up as a kid that his house was haunted by a woman, but she never paid it much mind until this night. So she's spending the night over there. She and her granddad are sitting there watching movies with his 2 German shepherds, and Eliza starts getting sleepy, so she decides she's going to go put her pajamas on. Now, when she stands up, she said she got this really weird feeling. It was almost like a head rush, and she never really got that before. She's not even sure if that really has anything to do with what happened to her, but she decides she as she grabs her PJs, is going to go into her aunt's old bedroom down the hallway to change into them. Her aunt did not live there anymore. As she is walking down the hallway, she starts to hear a woman singing, but she said it sounded weird. It sounded almost like old and laggy, like it's like broken up. She said it almost sounded like a radio playing or something. And as she gets closer and closer to the aunt's bedroom door, it gets louder, like it's coming from inside that room. When she gets to the doorway, she turns the doorknob and she opens it just a bit, when suddenly the door meets resistance, like somebody is standing on the other side holding it closed. And the second that Eliza felt that resistance on the door, the singing stopped. This freaked her out. So she slams the door shut, decides to go get changed elsewhere in the house, and then she goes and sits back down by her granddad, and she's like, did you have like music playing? Do you have a radio in here? And he's like, no, and I've never had a radio in this house. She does not know what to make of it. She is freaked out. She tries to put it past her as best she can, and she goes to bed. The next morning, just to try to debunk things, she goes to open that door again, and it swings open. No problems. There was nothing behind the door to hold it closed. So, what was behind the door? And who was singing in that room? You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Stay tuned for some more spooky stories.
Dude, both of those are super creepy, man. It sounds to me like, especially the first one with the creepy hand, like some kind of demonic entity. I don't know, man. Maybe ghosts are demonic entities. I've been kind of on that lately. Kind of like on some Evil Dead stuff, how they can kind of mimic humans and kind of trick you. Very strange that, when she goes to follow it, which I would never do, by the way. Oh no, getting out of there. That's for sure. But when she goes to follow it, it just disappears. That's just probably the strangest aspect of it, other than the scary hand coming through the door, around the door or whatever. Man, that's just, ugh. And I've heard so many stories too, like similar to the second story about like the creepy radio playing and sounding like old muffled, skippy kind of radio sounds, old music style. Oh man, it almost feels like tapping into some kind of other layer of reality or something like that. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Hey friends, it's me back for another scary story time from Reddit. Thank you for all the love on my last post. Appreciate it. I hit 1K followers. Wasn't a goal or anything, but I think that's cool. I'll be back in the shade. But this one is called My Town Had a Quiet Hour. Last night I found out why. This was written 28 days ago, and it says, I grew up in a tiny town in northern Maine. Population barely 900 people. The kind of place where everyone knows your truck by the sound of the engine. But the weirdest thing about the town wasn't the isolation. It was the quiet hour. Every night at exactly 1:13 a.m., every single person stayed inside for 1 hour. No lights on, no phones, no windows open, nothing. As a kid, I thought it was some old tradition. Like a weird small-town superstition. If you asked about it, adults would say, some things out there only notice you if you notice them first. No one explained further. Last month, my mom died, so I moved back home to clean out her house before selling it. I hadn't lived there in 12 years. Honestly, I'd forgotten about the quiet hour completely, until my first night back. At 1:10 a.m., my phone buzzed. A town emergency alert. Quiet hour begins in 3 minutes. Lock all entrances. Do not look outside. I actually laughed. I thought maybe the town had turned the old superstition into some dumb community thing. Then every light on the street went dark at once. Not one porch light remained. The entire town became pitch black. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Wet. Directly outside my house. I froze near the kitchen window. My first thought was someone's messing with me. Teenagers maybe. Then something tapped on the glass. Not a knock. A fingernail. Dragging slowly downward. I should have ignored it. Everyone always said not to look outside during quiet hour. Instead, I peeked through the blinds. There was a woman standing in my front yard. At least, I think it was a woman. She wore a long gray dress soaked in black at the bottom, like she walked through deep water. Her hair hung over her face completely. But what made my stomach drop was her height. She was impossibly tall. Her head nearly touched the low tree branches over my yard, and she was perfectly still. Then my phone buzzed again. Another emergency alert. Do not let them see you watching. The second my screen lit up, the woman's head snapped toward my window. I ducked immediately. Then came the sprinting. Not toward the house, around it. Fast footsteps circling the walls over and over. I heard fingernails scraping the siding. Windows rattling. Something laughing softly right outside my bedroom wall. I stayed curled on the kitchen floor, trying not to breathe. Then I heard my mother's voice upstairs. Eli? I stopped cold. My mom had been dead for 3 weeks. Eli, come upstairs, honey.
Bro.
Exactly her voice, perfectly. A
Creepy.
floorboard creaked above me. Something was walking through the hallway. I almost answered automatically. That's the scary part. For half a second, my brain genuinely believed it was her. Then I remembered something my grandfather told me when I was little. They only sound human when you're lonely. The footsteps stopped directly above me. Silence. Then, a single whisper right beside the kitchen window. He looked at me. Not you. He. Like it was talking to someone else. Suddenly, every dog in town started screaming, not barking, screaming. And from somewhere outside, dozens of footsteps began running through the streets all at once. I don't remember much after that. I hid under the kitchen table, covering my ears until sunlight came through the curtains. At 2:14 a.m. exactly, everything stopped. No footsteps, no whispers, nothing. The next morning, the town acted completely normal. People waved at me. The diner opened at 6. Nobody mentioned the night before. Finally, I asked the cashier, an old woman named Ruth, what the quiet hour actually was. She stared at me for a long time before answering. Then she quietly asked, "You looked outside, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Her face went pale immediately. She reached under the counter and handed me a folded piece of paper. On it was a list of names, hundreds of them. Every person in town who had ever looked outside during the quiet hour. Next to each name was a date, and beside some of the dates was a second note written in red ink. Heard their family afterward. I found my grandfather's name near the bottom, then my mother's. Before I could ask anything else, Ruth whispered, "You need to leave town before tonight." I asked her what happens if I stay. She looked toward the dark woods behind the diner windows and said, "They start talking to you during the daytime." It's a nice little 5-minute scary read. Again, if you have a story you want me to read, I would happily do that for you. Thank you again. Have a great day.
Gosh, man, that sounds like it's straight out of a freaking Stephen King story or something, dude. In Maine as well, I think they said it was. In like all of his stories around there or something like that. Man, that's so creepy. It sounds like a bad A24 movie, man. Actually would make a really good plot for a film. And somebody needs to look into this town, though, dude. What's up with that, man? If this one's real, it's like some weird old folklore or something and some kind of like witching hour stuff or something. I don't know, man. That's just super unsettling, and I'm glad I don't live there.
Creepy True Reddit Stories That Keep Me Up at Night Part 10. When I was younger, I had an imaginary friend who lived in this massive antique dresser. We'd chill out, and I vividly remember him telling me stories, although I have absolutely no recollection of what they actually were. I remember one day talking to my parents about it. Dad traveled quite a bit, so he wasn't up to date with what I was into. And when I started telling him about my dresser buddy, he wanted to know his name. It was something innocent like Peter or Patrick, but I can still see him going white in the face. I drew Peter or Patrick out for him, and the very next day, him and my uncle took out that dresser and burned it. It wasn't until a few years later when I found out my dad's little brother, my uncle, also had the same friend with the same name who lived in the same antique dresser. After a few months of the typical imaginary friend stuff, my uncle started having night terrors and couldn't sleep because of Peter or Patrick. It got so bad that they had to move him out of his room before he managed to get back to normal. Follow for more creepy true Reddit stories.
Peter or Patrick a demon, bro. Get out of there. Don't talk to that thing, man. Oh, man. I could only imagine being approached by a demon that lives in a dresser or whatever, man. That's just so frightening and weird. Oh, man. Have you ever had any kind of encounters like that before with anything? Some kind of entity trying to befriend you like that? Let me know in the comments.
So this is my first story that I've received about a wolf man. A wolf man or dog man. I think it's called a dog man. I don't know. But Jake from Georgia said he was out walking through the swamp at night checking traps. I don't know what, he didn't say what he was trapping. I'm assuming, like, I don't know what people trap in Georgia. But anyway, he was out in the swamps walking through the water. And he said he heard a noise. And at first it startled him because it sounded like there was a dog. And he's like, there can't be a dog out here. I'm standing in water all the way up halfway to my waist. He said, and all of a sudden, he heard a growl. He pulled out his phone because he could see something moving. First thing he thought was, is that a bear? So he pulls out his phone and he's watching. And this thing lifts up its head and looks right at him. He said he was scared to death, but he just froze and held his phone. He tried to walk backwards in the water and he almost tripped, but he kept the camera of his phone on this thing. He was able to get 2 pictures of it before it turned and ran away. He says, man, I don't know. I know you've probably gotten a lot of weird videos and a lot of strange pictures, he said, but I was a little nervous about sending you this because I feel crazy. And I'm like, wow, it's cool. I'm like, I appreciate you sending these pictures. I'm going to post them and see if we can get some information from other people and try to find out what exactly this thing is in Georgia. But all I could think of was like a dog that walks on its back legs, a werewolf, dog man. I don't know. I've never seen nothing like it. But he said the thing looked kind of like a black German Shepherd. But when it stood up, it was like almost 6 foot tall. And then it turned and ran away on its back legs, on 2 legs. It wasn't a dog. Check out the pictures and tell me if you've ever seen anything like this before. And if you can tell me what in the hell this thing is.
Dude. That's so creepy. Man, the Dogman stuff is probably my favorite cryptid or whatever, man. I'm just really into that one. It's just so interesting and so creepily scary. Probably because I'm a big horror movie fan and werewolves and stuff like that. It kind of feels like something like that. And to be honest, those are some of the scariest encounter stories I've heard so far are Dogman related. But yeah, man, this is a super creepy one. Very rarely do these stories come with images, so it's very cool to get some kind of image here. Hard to make out what we're looking at, but if you can kind of try to look at that face and imagine an angry black German Shepherd face, I can kind of see it, especially in the first one. The second one, you can definitely kind of maybe make that out. But this one here, definitely you can see the dog ears. You can see the shape of the face, almost dog or wolf-like. But yeah, man, let me know if you've ever had any kind of Dogman encounters. Definitely super interested to hear.
Scary, spooky story time. So, I'm going to give you a warning. If you are afraid of the unseen, scroll away. This video is not for you. All right, now one thing you need to know about me is I have psychic abilities. I see dead people. I astral project. I do all the things, especially in my dreams, and this is where this happens. So this was about 8 or 9 years ago, so I guess it's safe to tell the story now. I was dating somebody, and we had just moved in together. And typically, when I sleep, I have some form of nightlight on because I don't want spirits collecting at the end of my bed. I don't want to be woken up. It's turned off, right? So I have night lights to keep it all at bay. Well, we had just moved in together, and we didn't have everything set up. And he was like, do you want me to set up your light? I said, no, it should be fine. Whatever, it doesn't matter. So we went to bed. And in my dreams, I oftentimes go to other dimensions. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Or I'll astral project. I mean, I experience some incredible things in my dreams. So anyway, I remember waking up for whatever reason in this other dimension that I woke up in. I could still see everything as it was, as though I was fully awake. But I looked over where my boyfriend at the time was laying, and homeboy was levitating above the bed.
That's crazy.
Straight. Remember how you used to do light as a feather, stiff as a board, right? And you lift the person up, hovering above the bed, straight as a board. And I was looking at him, and I was like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden, he slammed down to the bed and then went back up. And then I think slammed down again, if I remember correctly. I snapped out of it, and I looked over at him, and he was laying there, and I was like, you know, and that right there told me that there was some really negative energy attached to him. Now, did I listen to it? No, because I knew some personal things he's going through and everything, and it wound up just wreaking havoc in our relationship. But it is what it is. It's, you know, the curse of being a sensitive person, right? So anyway, yeah, I woke him up, and I was like, something's wrong, turn on the light, you know, whatever. And that was the only time that I've ever experienced anything in the psychic world. I mean, I've had entities manifest in front of my face, and it didn't scare me. That scared me because I think that was his own stuff from his family, whatever. But that scared me. But nothing else has ever scared me. I've literally had things move in my house and entities in front of my face, and I've heard the voices of angels. Never has experienced anything scary but that. So, yeah. Have you ever had anything like that happen?
That's wild, man. Yeah, I think she's onto something there with the negative energy, maybe trying to show her or tell her something. Like she said, he had stuff going on, so maybe there was some sort of demonic entity attached to him or trying to attach to him, and that's the energy that manifested out of whatever was going on with that. That's all I can kind of really figure with this one. Let me know what you think.
Scary story that's definitely going to make you get up and go make sure that door's locked. So I moved out of state after college and got this like super tiny apartment by myself. It was like $600 a month and like the size of my living room. It wasn't in the best area, but it also wasn't in the worst area either. And I picked it because it like seemed pretty quiet and I could afford it. It was like a studio. So like when you walked in, you could see the kitchen on the left and then you could see straight into the bedroom and like throw a rock and hit the back wall. My headboard was up against that wall. So laying in my bed, I could see the front door. So one night I had worked late. I got home, I get in bed, all the lights are shut off. I start watching The Office and start to fall asleep and like pass out. Probably around like 2:30 in the morning, I woke up and like I can see like the glow of the TV because I fell asleep with it on. And I'm like trying to kind of like wake up and orient myself. And I look like into the dark, like toward the kitchen area, living room area. And as my eyes are trying to adjust, I can make out the figure of a person standing in that doorway to my bedroom. I'm extremely superstitious, so initially I'm thinking like I'm dreaming or there's a ghost, and then I quickly realize like there's a man standing in my apartment. So I let out like a yelp, like a holler, and he runs back through the front door, which is like open. So I call the police come, they like check. There's only like 2 windows in the whole place, and they're in that front area. Like there's no sign that anybody broke in. I didn't hear anybody break in. He's like, does anyone have a key? I'm like, nobody else has a key. And he's like, any chance you didn't lock your door? And I was like, yeah, there's probably like a chance I didn't lock my door. So I get a well-deserved lecture from the police about checking your locks because anything could have happened. It was probably just a drunk person or a person that walked into the wrong apartment, but anything could have happened. So this is me reminding you to please go lock your doors before bed.
I definitely make sure the doors are locked all the time, man. I don't trust whatever's going on out there a lot of the times, man. So I'm definitely one of those people who's always checking the door to make sure it's locked, because this one sounds like it's probably that. It's probably some kind of home intruder, maybe like she said, a drunk person who's in the wrong place, or maybe not. You never know. So yeah, man, be safe out here, dude, for sure.
A viewer emailed me this story that it honestly sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. And they grew up in Philadelphia during the mid-1990s, and they swear that the woman that their parents hired as a live-in maid slowly became something else. Now, the viewer asked me to change everyone's names, so we're going to call them Emily, and we're going to call the maid Mrs. Vera. And Emily was only 8 years old when Mrs. Vera came to work for the family. And at first, she seemed completely normal, right? Very quiet, very polite, very kind, maybe a little reserved at first, but she cleaned the house, she cooked dinner, took care of the kids, and even helped tuck Emily into bed at night. Now, for the first few months, nothing felt unusual. Then the noises began. And almost every night around 2 or 3 in the morning, Emily would wake up to the faint sound of scratching above her bedroom ceiling. And it wasn't rats, it wasn't pipes, it sounded like fingernails dragging slowly across the old wood floor. Now, her father searched the attic twice, and pest control even came and inspected the house, and they found nothing. But the scratching continued night after night. And a few weeks later, Emily made the mistake of getting up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. And as she walked past the hallway closet, she heard whispering, and not from inside the house. She said that she could tell it was coming from the small crawl space that was hidden. It was hidden above the closet door, And she looked just up in time to see 2 fingers slowly pull the little wood hatch closed. And she immediately ran to her parents' room screaming, and her father grabbed the flashlight and opened up the crawl space, but it was empty. The dust inside hadn't even been disturbed. Now, the next morning, Mrs. Vera showed up for breakfast with dirt packed beneath every single fingernail. And she wasn't doing any gardening the day before or the night before, so that kind of got ruled out. When Emily's mother had asked what happened to her hand, she simply just said, "Oh, the walls are older than people think." Odd.
Okay.
And things became stranger after that. Food would disappear from the pantry only to turn up inside of the attic. Family photographs began appearing face down all over the home. Emily started waking up with muddy footprints on her bedroom carpet that led to nowhere and pretty much came from nowhere, just there. Then one night her father finally saw it for himself, and he woke up to the sound of whispering above his and his wife's bedroom. So he quietly climbed out of bed and he went up into the attic, and he found Mrs. Vera crouched on all fours in the darkness. She wasn't facing him, she was just facing the wall, like inches away, and her forehead was like pressed up against it, and it was pressed up against the wood as she was whispering the same sentence over and over again. And she kept saying, I'm almost ready, just a little bit longer, I'm almost ready. And when he called her name, she stopped and snapped out of it. But she didn't really turn around. Instead, her head slowly tilted sideways until it was like almost resting completely on her shoulder. And then she would give this weird laugh, not loudly, just like enough for him to hear, like a little cackle. Now, the next morning, Emily's parents told her that she couldn't work for the family anymore. They were concerned, and they offered to help her pay for a doctor or a psychiatric treatment because whatever was happening, they believed that she needed some serious help and she needed it fast. Mrs. Vera didn't cry, she didn't argue. She simply just stood at the front door holding her one little suitcase, and she looked directly at Emily and she said, "This house knows my name and it will forever remember yours." And before leaving, she placed her hand on the front door frame and she whispered something under her breath that no one could understand. It almost sounded like it was another language. And Emily's father slammed the door immediately behind her and he changed all the locks. Now, for a while, everything seemed pretty normal again. Until 3 nights later, at around 2 in the morning, the scratching sound came back. Only now, it wasn't above the ceiling anymore. It was actually coming from inside of the walls themselves. And Emily says it continued for nearly 6 months before it suddenly stopped forever. No one had ever seen Mrs. Vera again. The family even checked in a couple months later to try to see if, how she was doing. Nothing. And years later, after both of her parents had passed away, Emily and her brother re-renovated the old Philadelphia home. And when contractors opened one of the sections up of the wall that was near the upstairs hallway, they actually found dozens of long scratches carved into the inside of the wooden beams. Dude, and mixed between them were words carved so deeply that they nearly split the wood. And every sentence was the same thing over and over. I'm almost ready. I'm almost ready. And Emily ended her email saying to me that sometimes when she can't sleep at night and she's having nightmares, she still hears scratching inside of her walls, even though she lives over 900 miles away from her childhood home. Dude. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
Man, that sounds like almost some kind of demonic possession had taken over this house, almost maybe. And maybe that possession or demon or whatever it was, entity was attached to the caretaker or whatever, the maid, and, maybe it was trying to manifest itself through her or something like that. That's kind of what this one sounds like to me. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Super creepy though, man. Definitely sounds like a great movie plot. You know what I mean? It would work great for, some kind of creepy A24 movie or whatever. But yeah, like I said, let me know in the comments what you think of this one and the rest of these stories here, man. Just wanted to just jump on real quick and do a little random TikTok looking at and see what we could find. I think that's probably the direction we'll be going in a lot of the times with most of the videos nowadays. It's just kind of jumping on and seeing what my weird algorithm can show us. Today it showed us a lot of weird, creepy stories, so that's always fun. But yeah, man, thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Y'all have a good one, and I'll see you next time.